There's our whole celebration around when a person dies. And I think ceremonies and rites are so important because they provide us with a sense of tradition. They allow us to know what we're supposed to do in times when we don't want to think. They allow us to connect with God.
You never anticipate planning a funeral for your baby boy. There's no way to prepare yourself for that.
My mom said to me, "Dad wants you to sing Ave Maria at the funeral." It's a big ask to say to your 19-year-old daughter, will you sing at your dad's funeral?
As a funeral director, many times families would come in. They would say to me, "Well, you knew Mom and Dad. What do you think they would want?" I would just look at them and say, "I don't know." So I think it's important to go to the funeral home, sit down and talk about the things that you want. Discuss why those things are important. But take someone with you. Either you do the work before a person dies or before you die, or somebody has to do it afterwards.
I've seen when people prepare their funerals ahead of time, I've seen it as such a gift from the person who passed away to his or her loved ones. Because what that allows the family to do is to focus just on the work of grieving. That way the celebration of life can truly be a celebration.
My father's name was and is Wesley Lane Crocker Jr. He had a nickname for me. When I was born, he said that I looked like a little baby bear, and so he started calling me Cublet, and he called me Cublet my whole life. My parents got us all music lessons when we were younger, and we started out on piano, and then they realized that I could sing. I remember my dad, since he was so tall and had this beautiful snow white hair, I'd be warming up and then I'd get up to sing for Mass, and he would walk in and just be beaming with pride. I was lucky enough to be at his retirement dinner from the FBI. One coworker of his said that he knew the first names of almost 450 employees. That's insane, and it was important to him to, I think, connect with people. It's still kind of shocking because he was diagnosed with lung cancer on June 7th and died July 24th, 6 weeks later. One evening, he was able to, with my mom, talk about a funeral, and he said, "Cublet will sing Ave Maria." Just kind of said yes on autopilot, and I gotta tell you, to this day, it's the best I've ever sung. And so in between these two verses, it had been cloudy and raining when we went in for the funeral, and sunlight streamed through the stained glass behind me in our church. So I sang that and was really just so pleased and felt like, oh, Dad would be really, really happy with that. Because of how well liked he was by his coworkers and friends and how many family were there. You know, we had over 400 people at his funeral, which was just such a testament to him. His dear friend and coworker gave a beautiful eulogy. To see this big, strong FBI agent eulogize my dad was very moving. There's one line I remember particularly where he gets choked up and says that he was talking to my dad in the hospital and says,
"I can see the contentment in his eyes."
And then he got choked up. It was just an incredible moment. One thing that always brings me comfort is knowing that he is in such joy and peace wherever he is, and I cannot picture what heaven will be like, and I'm glad that I can't. And I don't know how I'll see him again, but I feel confident that I will. He died too young, but he won the cup, you know? I think.
We found out we were pregnant in August. We went through the joyful moments of telling my parents, telling his parents, telling our friends. One of my favorite photos, we were camping with our friends, and some stranger took a photo, and I go to hand him my camera, and I said, on the third one, say Traci's pregnant. So he did it, and then he goes, Traci's pregnant, and then everyone is just so joyful.
I think at the 12-week mark, they did a ultrasound. There was just little things that they caught, such as his growth was a little bit behind. Traci got blood work done. A genetic counselor reached out to us. The test came back positive for trisomy 18.
We just really weren't expecting it. I was terrified. When he was born and he came out and I saw him, I was like, oh my God, I would have done anything. Why was I so scared?
He was born at 11:27 in the morning and passed away at 12:30. And even though we knew and we anticipated this, you still can't quite prepare for it.
Yeah.
Planning the funeral for Jacob, it was about 3 weeks after he was born is when the funeral happened. To me, the hardest part, to be honest with you, was the eulogy. Eulogizing my son who I knew on earth for 48 minutes. I just wanted it to make my son proud. So that was the hardest, but it was also the most cathartic part of the whole planning process.
My son was born and he had a heartbeat. That little nugget fought to meet us, the heart of a lion or an itty lion. And Jacob taught me more in those 48 minutes about my Heavenly Father's love than I could have learned in a million lifetimes without him. 48 minutes is an incredibly short amount of time in a life. However, our time with Jacob wasn't measured in minutes, it was measured in love, which we know will last us forever.
So before we knew that Jacob was a boy, we called him Nugget. We were actually planning on doing a home birth and waiting until the baby arrived to find out the sex. It just goes to show you that you can plan your birth, but you have no control over it.
We had a buffalo sauce fountain with nuggets, and of course Nugget, he was our nugget, so we got to enjoy that fountain that we had at our wedding.
We had the mass for his funeral, and where we had the reception were the same places where we got married and where we had our reception. Getting the opportunity to do both of those things in the same place and just celebrate his life and our love for him in the same place that we celebrated our love for each other. Weird to say, like, beautiful, but it was.
Yeah, I think it was a great example of how St. Monica's Church has been there for both joy and sorrow and wrapped their arms around us both times in very different ways.
I remember taking a walk with my dad and him saying, when you cry, you're not crying for Jacob, you're crying for yourself, because Jacob's in heaven. He's in, the best possible place that he could be. I've thought about heaven before, but I think about it so much more often now, knowing that he's there. It feels so much more real now than it did before. And I know that I'll get to see him again. And I'm excited for that day.
He's watching over his mom and dad. That gives us a lot of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
This did not deter us from wanting to have a family. We are hoping that we're blessed with a baby, and hopefully a healthy one. We always said we wanted to have a boy first so he could look after his little siblings, and God answered that prayer.
Yeah.
And he will. Jacob
and in
will.
God's fashion, he answered it in God's way.
Yeah. The next baby is going to be called Small Fry.
Emotional reactions vary during a funeral service, but one thing is always true. If you bring your feelings out and you are in a sacred space to be able to share them, that is one of the most healing things that you can ever do. It's prayerful, it's intentional, it hopefully brings people together.
The church is called to grieve with the grievers, to walk with the grievers, to help them along their grieving process. This is not something where after the funeral, it's done. It's not. We are supposed to continue walking with people. And if we can be together and walk with each other, not only are we helping with the immediate feelings, not only helping with the practical, but we are also witnesses of faith to each other. That paschal death is not the end. It is just the opening and invitation to a new life that we did not plan or anticipate, but that we've been invited into.
To my dad's credit, he gave me this book, The Power of Positive Thinking, in high school. The first thing that I turned to when I opened this was he had highlighted, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. He really believed it. Another part he has highlighted. Apparently, you never realized that some of those who failed to get high grades in school have been the greatest successes outside of school, which is good for our family because math wasn't easy.